In this episode, I'll be sharing the story of Daryl Bailey, also known as Little Trigger, a member of the Six Deuce Brims. By the late 1970s, violent conflicts between Crips and Bloods, as well as internal rivalries among Crip sets, had turned Los Angeles into a war zone. As the 1980s and 1990s unfolded, the city's murder rate skyrocketed, with South Central becoming a battleground for more than 100 different gangs. Growing up in such an environment was extremely dangerous. Many young people in Los Angeles were drawn into the gang lifestyle, often becoming drug dealers or gang members. For most, this path led either to an early death or a lifetime in prison. Daryl Bailey was one of those youths who became deeply entrenched in gang life. Daryl's early life and gang affiliation. Daryl Bailey was born around 1973 and grew up in South Central Los Angeles. Eventually, he became affiliated with the Harvard Park Six Deuce Brims, a blood set. The Six Deuce Brims became one of the most well-known blood sets in Los Angeles, gaining a reputation for their street activity. Surrounded by several powerful enemy gangs, including the Rolling 60s Crips, the Avenue's Gangsta Crips, and the Hoovers, the Brims were constantly in conflict. They formed strong alliances with other blood sets, especially those within the Brim Alliance, such as the Fruittown Brims and the Van Ness Gangster Brims. The Brims made headlines for their violent actions, with several members gaining notoriety for shootings and other criminal activities. Some members, like Ace Capone, went on shooting sprees, such as the infamous incident where he shot into a crowd of Hoovers at a party, leaving multiple people dead after they had robbed him. Another member, Little Sonny, killed several Rolling 60s Crips in retaliation for his brother's murder. Both men are now serving life sentences for their crimes. Daryl, aka Little Trigger, would soon follow in their footsteps, living up to his name in a violent way. The shooting incident, August 31, 1988. By the late 1980s, Daryl was trying to build his name within his gang and gain more recognition. To do this, he decided it was time to prove himself. On August 31, 1988, Daryl drove through enemy gang territories, randomly firing shots. He wounded 3 people in total. Among them was a 14-year-old boy named Jerry Johnson, who was outside cleaning his brother's car when Daryl pulled up and shot him. Jerry was critically injured but survived. After the shooting, Daryl faced 6 counts of attempted murder. However, during his trial, he managed to walk out of the courtroom, making him a wanted man. Authorities also suspected him in a conspiracy to kill a witness, further increasing the severity of his charges. Escape to St. Louis. With law enforcement after him, Daryl fled Los Angeles and went to St. Louis, where he had several family members. By this time, LA gang culture had spread across the country, and St. Louis had become home to various Crip and Blood sets, many of which were started by Los Angeles gang members. Interestingly, Daryl was related to future rapper Chingy, who later spoke about his family ties in an interview on Vlad TV. Chingy provided insight into what he witnessed growing up in the streets and how gangs and drug culture took hold in St. Louis. My family, the Bailey family and the Crawford family, were contributors to that. My aunties, uncles, dad, and cousins used to go to LA to handle business. But when they returned, they would bring back drugs and some of the gang members, posting them up in different hoods where they did what they did. This was around 1985, 1986, and 1987. I was young, but I paid attention to what was going on around me. My relatives were Bloods, and their gang, the Harvard Park Six Deuce Brims, originated in Los Angeles before they brought it to St. Louis. I remember being around them in an apartment where 10 to 15 Bloods would gather. Crips from LA would come over occasionally because they needed to talk to my aunt and uncle about business. Even though there was tension between the Bloods and Crips, they never fought in that space because my uncle and aunt mediated the situation. This wave of gang activity and drug culture took root in St. Louis, and that's how the gangbanging scene started there. Daryl was already connected in St. Louis, but police were hot on his trail. Things escalated when his story appeared on the nationally broadcasted show America's Most Wanted, which detailed the history of criminals, including those on the run. A segment on Daryl Bailey aired on December 10, 1989. Actor Taryn Turner, best known for his role as Kane in Menace to Society, portrayed Darryl in the reenactment. Like many boys growing up in the tough streets of South Central LA, Daryl Bailey joined a street gang. The August 31, 1988 shooting. On August 31, 1988, police say Bailey set out to make his mark the easy way, with a gun. According to authorities, he rode through rival gang territory, stopping just long enough to gun down 14-year-old Jerry Huff while the boy was cleaning his brother's car. After the shooting rampage, Bailey faced 6 counts of attempted murder. However, before his trial was even over, he walked out of the courtroom and disappeared. Escaped to St. Louis and manhunt. Police suspected that Bailey fled Los Angeles and headed to St. Louis, Missouri, where he had family. The America's Most Wanted segment brought in multiple tips about Daryl's whereabouts. A special anti-gang task force tracked Bailey to a house owned by his aunt. However, by the time police arrived, he had already fled. Further tips confirmed sightings of him, leading authorities to focus on St. Louis. They set up surveillance at another suburban house owned by his aunt, but Bailey disappeared once again, just hours before police arrived. The arrest, January 8, 1990. On January 8, 1990, police received a tip that Daryl was hiding in a house in St. Louis. When officers arrived, they stopped a man leaving the house and questioned him. The suspect admitted that Daryl was inside. Moments later, police stormed the house and found Daryl Bailey hiding in the attic. He was arrested by 7 members of the Fugitive Apprehension Strike Team in an area of St. Louis called Vela Village. Police reaction and America's Most Wanted impact. St. Louis police credited America's Most Wanted for being instrumental in Bailey's capture. One detective stated, "Without their profile on Daryl, we would not have known he was a fugitive. He was already known to us, and we were quickly able to pick up his trail. We developed several informants who knew Daryl and followed several good leads. The task force intensified their efforts, and on that Monday night, their work paid off. We got a tip earlier in the evening that he'd be at this location. When we arrived, we set up surveillance cars. Shortly after, one of the subjects came out of the house. We stopped that subject, and he told us that Daryl Bailey was inside. We discovered Daryl Bailey hiding in the attic, and that's where we made the arrest. Justice for Jerry Huff." Back in Los Angeles, Bailey's arrest was good news for shooting victim Jerry Huff and his mother. Jerry, still recovering from his injuries, expressed relief. "They got him. I can go outside now. I can have a little freedom, knowing he won't come around the corner and shoot me again." Daryl Bailey was placed in the custody of St. Louis police, awaiting extradition to California to face justice. Right now, I'm just hoping that goes through. Thanks to your tips, 91 fugitives have now been captured. Daryl was extradited back to California, where he faced charges for 6 counts of attempted murder at the age of 17. By this time, his entire life had been thrown away for the streets. There is little information about Daryl's current whereabouts, but his story serves as a reflection of how chaotic the 80s and 90s were. The Crips are a primarily African-American alliance of street gangs that are based in the coastal regions of Southern California. Founded in Los Angeles, California, in 1969, mainly by Raymond Washington and Stanley Williams, the Crips began as an alliance between 2 autonomous gangs, and developed into a loosely connected network of individual sets, often engaged in open warfare with one another. Its members have traditionally worn blue clothing since around 1973. The Crips are one of the largest and most violent associations of street gangs in the United States. With an estimated 30,000 to 35,000 members in 2008, the gang's members have been involved in murders, robberies, and drug dealing, among other crimes. They have a long and bitter rivalry with the Bloods. Some sources suggest that the original name for the alliance, Crips, was narrowed down from a list of many options and chosen unanimously from 3 final choices, over the Black Overlords and the Assassins. Crips was chosen to reflect the young age of the majority of the gang members. The name evolved into Crips when gang members began carrying around canes to display their pimp status. People in the neighborhood then began calling them cripples, or Crips for short. In February 1972, the Los Angeles Times used the term. Another source suggests Crips may have evolved from Cripplers, a 1970s street gang in Watts, of which Washington was a member. The name had no political, organizational, cryptic, or acronymic meaning, though some have suggested it stands for Common Revolution in Progress, a backronym. According to the film Bastards of the Party, directed by a former member of the Bloods, the name represented Community Revolutionary Inter-Party Service, or Community Reform Inter-Party Service. Some self-identified Crips have been convicted of federal racketeering. Gang activity in south-central Los Angeles has its roots in a variety of factors dating to the 1950s, including post-World War II economic decline leading to joblessness and poverty, racial segregation of young African American men who were excluded from organizations such as the Boy Scouts, leading to the formation of black street clubs, and the waning of black nationalist organizations such as the Black Panther Party and the Black Power movement. Stanley Tookie Williams met Raymond Lee Washington in 1969, and the two decided to unite their local gang members from the west and east sides of south-central Los Angeles in order to battle neighboring street gangs. Most of the members were 17 years old. Williams, however, appears to discount the sometimes cited founding date of 1969 in his memoir, Blue Rage, Black Redemption. In his memoir, Williams also refuted claims that the group was a spin-off of the Black Panther Party or formed for a community agenda, writing that it depicted a fighting alliance against street gangs. Nothing more, nothing less. Washington, who attended Fremont High School, was the leader of the East Side Crips, and Williams, who attended Washington High School, led the West Side Crips. Williams recalled that a blue bandana was first worn by Crips founding member Curtis Buddha Morrow, as a part of his color-coordinated clothing of blue levis, a blue shirt, and dark blue suspenders. A blue bandana was worn in tribute to Morrow after he was shot and killed on February 23, 1973. The color then became associated with Crips. By 1978, there were 45 Crip gangs, called sets, in Los Angeles. They were heavily involved in the production of PCP, marijuana, and amphetamines. On March 11, 1979, Williams, a member of the West Side Crips, was arrested for 4 murders, and on August 9, 1979, Washington was gunned down. Washington had been against Crip infighting, and after his death several Crip sets started fighting against each other. The Crips' leadership was dismantled, prompting a deadly gang war between the Rollin' 60 neighborhood Crips and 8 Trey gangster Crips that led nearby Crip sets to choose sides and align themselves with either the neighborhood Crips or the gangster Crips, waging large-scale war in South Central and other cities. The East Coast Crips, from East Los Angeles, and the Hoover Crips directly severed their alliance after Washington's death. By 1980, the Crips were in turmoil, warring with the Bloods and against each other. After the Nicaraguan Revolution in 1979, many of the former government of Anastasio Somoza Debayle fled to the U.S. and were supported by the CIA to counter the Communists. Enrique Bermudez was allegedly picked by the CIA to head the Contras, who met with Oscar Danilo Blandon and Norwin Menezes to discuss fundraising. They decided to use drug trafficking to raise funds, and targeted black communities in South Los Angeles. The gang's growth and influence increased significantly in the early 1980s when crack cocaine boomed and Crip sets began distributing the drug. Large profits induced many Crips to establish new markets in other cities and states. As a result, Crips membership grew steadily, and the street gang was one of the nation's largest by the late 1980s. In 1999, there were at least 600 Crip sets with more than 30,000 members transporting drugs in the United States. As of 2015, the Crips gang consists of between approximately 30,000–35,000 members and 800 sets, active in 221 cities and 41 U.S. states. The states with the highest estimated number of Crip sets are California, Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Members typically consist of young African American men, but can be white, Hispanic, Asian, and Pacific Islander. The gang also began to establish a presence in Canada in the early 1990s. Crip sets are active in the Canadian cities of Montreal and Toronto. In 1992, the LAPD estimated 15,742 Crips in 108 sets. Other source estimates were 30,000 to 35,000 in 600 sets in California. Crips have served in the United States Armed Forces and on military bases in the United States and abroad. Some practices of Crip gang life include graffiti and substitutions and deletions of particular letters of the alphabet. The letter B in the word blood is disrespected among certain Crip sets and written with a cross inside it because of its association with the enemy. The letters CK, which are interpreted to stand for Crip killer, are avoided and replaced by CC. For example, the words kickback are written kickbotch, and block is written as block. Many other words and letters are also altered due to symbolic associations. Crips traditionally refer to each other as cuz or cuz, which itself is sometimes used as a moniker for a Crip. Crab is the most disrespectful epithet to call a Crip, and can warrant fatal retaliation. Crips in prison modules in the 1970s and 1980s sometimes spoke Swahili to maintain privacy from guards and rival gangs. As with most criminal street gangs, Crips have benefited monetarily from illicit activities such as illegal gambling, drug dealing, pimping, larceny, and robbery. Crips also profit from extorting local drug dealers who are not members of the gang. Along with profitable rackets such as these, they also participate in vandalism and property crime, often for gang pride reasons or simply enjoyment. This can include public graffiti, tagging, and joyriding in stolen vehicles. The gang's current primary source of income is street-level drug distribution. However, many Crip members also make notable amounts of funds from the black market sale of illicit firearms. The gang's size and power was greatly augmented by the profits from the street sale of crack cocaine throughout the 1980s. The gang's initial phase of growth and popularity was due to the explosion of crack cocaine in the United States during the 1980s.